Jason, man, I've got a problem.
What's the problem, man?
I don't have enough 5-star reviews on my Google page for my
Oh,
office.
man, that's totally important for a dental practice, man.
How else am I supposed to get new patients coming in my door?
Well, tell you what, Alan.
What, Jason?
If you go to 5starreviewsystem.com and mention the dental hacks,
What will they do for you?
you can get $50 off the setup fee
Holy cow.
and start getting awesome 5-star reviews for your dental office.
Nothing but 5-star reviews. It's amazing stuff. It really is. We have lots of listeners that use the 5-star review system.
Yes.
And if you drop our name, tell them the Dental Hack sent you, or give them the code 5970 when you sign in, they'll knock $50 off your setup fee. And you help support the podcast.
Yes.
So you need more 5-star Google reviews.
You do.
And 5-star review system is the way to get them.
Get them.
This is the Dental Hacks Podcast, a podcast created by dentists for dentists. Now, sit back, relax. You're about to be hacked.
Hello, Dental Hacks listeners, and welcome to episode 95 of the Dental Hacks. My name is Alan Mead.
And hey there, I'm your trusty Jason Lipscomb.
Your trusty Jason Lipton?
Not really.
Yeah. Well, you say that because it sounds good.
Yeah, I wouldn't count on me.
Yeah. Well, unless you need your teeth straightened.
Yes. Ooh.
Or you need your arch scanned. I'd count on you then.
Yeah.
So
or your whole body scan, for that matter.
That's hot.
Yeah.
Jason will scan your body.
Then I'll look at it.
That was actually kind of cool. But so tell me a little bit about. I understand there's some news in the works for your lovable 3Shape. Tell us about 3Shape. What did you hear about 3Shape?
3Shape is going to be has been approved to accept for Invisalign cases, so that should be coming up. Yeah,
okay.
That's what you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
And
well, also that you said they were coming out with some kind of a milling unit too, eh?
Yeah, supposedly they're coming out with a milling unit. I've been trying to get some information about it. I've been trying for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to get what's called a 3Shape inbox, would allow me to use my 3Shape for my 3D printer.
Yeah.
So still working on that one.
Well, you know who to call, right? You call Sergey.
Sergey.
Hello, this is 3Shape. What can I do for you?
You don't want to print for 3Shape.
So that's really kind of cool. Do you think they're going to come in and try and eat Sorona's lunch here? Is that what you're thinking?
I don't know. It's possible. I went to lab day when we went to the Chicago Midwinter meeting, and I walked in, and you normally think when you go to the dental thing, everybody's over at the Sorona booth,
mm-hmm.
and then you go to lab day, and the Sorona guy was like the loneliest guy there, and you kind of see, hey, it's two different worlds. And
on the lab side of things, Sorona they haven't run the market in the same way that the chair side, where they kind of own it at this point.
But they were mills and 3D printers all over the place, and they were all different types of brands and different mills for different things and 3D printers and stuff. So there's a lot of other stuff out there that we don't really know about that's coming down.
Yeah, the lab guys see so much more. It's interesting. Remember last week I sent you that link to like alien milling or whatever because it came up on my Facebook page. It's like honest to God, they say we mill zirconia from your STL file, and I'm not even sure they're a lab. I honestly wonder if they send it to you on a sprue or something. I have no idea.
I mean,
but it's like $29 a unit, and I don't know. They're not. It doesn't even seem like they're acting like they're a lab that's going to give you a finished product. They just mill it for you. So I wonder if that was actually geared towards lab people, and it just happened to come across. Anyhow, I'll put a link up to that because the website's cool. I'm not quite sure what you'd be getting from them, but so they're starting to market towards dentists, and I'm thinking, okay, are they thinking of replacing the lab? I don't even get it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the guy where I bought my 3D printer from is just a secular non-dental 3D shop. And I was like, look, you could have dentists send you STL files and print these models out for them. He wouldn't necessarily have to be a lab, I don't think. So, I mean, there's a lot of development in the outside world other than the dental stuff it's just going crazy right now.
It is. It is.
You can imagine these little child geniuses sitting at home with their 3D printers and figuring out this software and different things to do with it. That's where the real advancement comes in technology.
It's like the technology comes out and then the people applying it to different ways that no one had thought to do. That's where it's at. And that's kind of dentistry is sort of in the middle of that right now.
The Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing comes into play where you got a 3-year-old playing with a 3D printer, and by the time he's 13, he's making these great advancements in this technology.
Printing full mouth rehabs in his spare time kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, around here, some of the schools have 3D printers in kindergarten, and they're teaching these kids how to code and how to use 3D printers and stuff.
That's kind of cool.
Things are going to change quickly.
Yeah, the first time I saw a 3D printer where it was actually kind of doing dental stuff was at Ultradent, where they print out, like, you figure Ultradent has lots of gadgety kind of stuff, and they had full huge 3D printers of where they would print out prototypes of their new products and stuff. It was pretty amazing that it was all being done right there too. So there's a lot of this technology coming into dentistry for sure.
And Stratus has just released the printer that can print like thousands of different colors. I mean, you could print a full color model you could scan like a Star Wars figure and just print that same Star Wars figure true color right out in your hands.
That's
crazy. There's all different types of things you're going to be able to do with those things before long.
Yeah, and once the price comes down, then the sky's the limit on what you do.
Yeah. Hey, I need a pair of shoes. I'm going to go print my shoes.
Seriously.
I need an impression gun. I'm just going to go pull this STL file off the internet and print me an impression gun.
I need a revolver. Wait.
Not that type of gun.
Not that
just
type.
Just dental guns.
Yeah, just dental guns. That's right.
Much more dangerous. Much more expensive than real guns.
So we had an interview with someone that we'd been told by many people that we needed to get, and we finally got him. We have David Harris from Prosperident, and he was talking about embezzlement. And he was really good. He was a little shocking. There were a lot of... It's not often that Jason and I don't have anything to say. There were several times where we were somewhat speechless in what he was talking about. But he was really good. He was really surprisingly good. It's probably the most entertaining talk I've ever heard about embezzlement. We had a pretty good time, actually, considering the topic. And what I thought was really interesting is how he basically said the best investigators that he has are the ones that can think really well like a criminal. So it was sort of, he talks a little bit about, look, you got to get into the criminal mind. You got to get in their shoes to see, where you're vulnerable in your office.
I'm thinking like Crazy Eyes from like Orange is the New Black, and they're just running into a dental office and
that's right,
staring everybody in the eye.
He said that probably those people you'd be able to pick up on your filter. The ones that are really good embezzlers would get way past your filters before you ever knew they were there.
Like scared straight type of thing.
Exactly. So it's not to discourage, but it is, I think everyone's got to be super aware. He also gives a link that we'll put in the show notes that you actually, he's offering to our listeners to take his embezzlement risk assessment. And we'll put a link in the show notes. And you'll use the code Dental Hacks all together, no spaces, Dental Hacks. And until like the end of July, you can actually take that for free to get an assessment for your office for embezzlement. So
where do you find the show notes, Alan? We've had people actually ask us that question before. So.
The show notes can be found at dentalhacks.com. And you'll go to the main website, and then you can pick the episode. And each episode, you'll have the full show notes. And we say, check the show notes. That's exactly right. You go to dentalhacks.com and choose the episode that you're looking for. Or
show notes are pretty much the cliff notes of the episode.
Exactly.
All the good stuff.
Exactly. If we have links we talk about, for the most part, we have them up there. And actually, your podcasting software, which is to say iTunes or Pocket Casts or Stitcher or whatever, they usually have they'll have the show notes with the links right within your phone, too, so you can go there, too. So, anyhow, let's go ahead and take a listen to David Harris of Prosperident.
And now it's time for the Dental Hacks interview.
Hello, Dental Hacks listeners, and welcome to another segment. This evening we have a highly sought-after guest. We've had other guests that have demanded that we get this man on. We have David Harris of Prosperident, who, he's coming from Nova Scotia, Canada. Nova Scotia. Help me out here, David. What's the full? I don't want to be insulting to our Canadian friends.
Oh, the city's called Halifax.
Yeah, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Okay, got it. Got it. So, welcome, David. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you.
Great to be here.
All right, so we had Sandy Pardue on the show a few months ago, and we talked a little bit about embezzlement, but she said, if you want to talk about embezzlement, you have to get David. So then we sought after David, and after a few hits and misses, we finally have him. So tonight we're going to talk about embezzlement with David, and that is his specialty. So I do want you to tell us a little bit about yourself, David, because I listened to you were on Howard Fran's podcast some months back, and you talked about, he mentioned in the bio that you overcame a troubled adolescence before your background in Prosperident. So tell me a little bit about that.
A few things. I certainly broke some rules in my teens and got caught, and was fortunate enough to escape things like going to jail. But
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, it was very good.
I know a little bit about that myself. Yeah,
I ended up joining the Army because it seemed like a lot better plan.
Okay.
But I was definitely a miscreant and certainly an underachiever at school. My parents, I think, were despairing that I would ever turn into a productive citizen. Luckily, I was able to turn my life around.
So I remember reading something about, aren't you? Okay, this is like great. I pin you on this. Aren't you like your tested IQ is sort of off the chart? That's what I read somewhere. Could that be correct?
I don't know about that. I am a member of Mensa, but
okay, maybe that's what I read. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to measure it. No, I don't think I'm off the chart by
Jason, don't say anything dumb, okay?
That's everything I say.
I'm sorry. No, that's very cool. I love that. That's totally interesting to me. So, where'd you grow up, David?
I grew up here in Halifax.
Okay.
I'm lucky enough to have a profession where I can live in my hometown, and I certainly value that.
That's very cool. Tell us a little bit about the company, Prosperident.
Well, we are the largest at what we do, and what Prosperident does is investigate every day embezzlement committed against dentists. Just to be clear, we don't work with any other profession. We don't help medical doctors or pharmacists or Walmart or anybody else. Dentistry is what we do, and we spend our time chasing embezzlers.
Okay,
that's a sad state of affairs that you can focus in on one profession
that you
being
can specialize in.
Yes.
Just out of curiosity, how'd you land on dentists? I mean, do you have a background with dentistry, or is it just that it's such an obvious? You have so much to do. I'm just curious.
I got there by accident, but I just want to go back to what Jason said. People are, first of all, surprised that I could make a living working with dentists. Then when they understand the size of my company, they're even more surprised. Prosperident has 13 investigators.
Wow.
And again, this is all we do. We're even subspecialized, so we have some investigators who only work with orthodontists.
Really?
And we have another group who do what are called special investigations. So these are the ugliest files.
Okay.
Dentists stealing from each other in a group practice.
Okay.
Spouses stealing from dentists, things like that. That's what special investigations.
I feel like there's a TV show in that, like the ugliest of the ugly files, and then you could have I think that'd be really good, like a reality show. I think that'd be excellent.
Special investigations even has a motto, and it's where the unusual happens on a daily basis and the unthinkable happens about once a month.
That's
Truth
funny.
is always stranger than fiction.
Yeah, it's funny yet horrifying to hear you say that, because obviously what you guys see is so far out of what dentists are thinking, I suspect.
There's a whole other world out there, and we get to live in it.
Yeah.
Back to your question about how I got into this game. It was totally by accident. I had no burning desire to deal with dentists for the rest of my life. No business plan. It was 1989, so I've been at this now for over a quarter century. I had quit my job. I was doing investigations for a bank, and I was sitting at home thinking about my future. and the phone rang, and it was a friend of mine who happened to be a dentist. And he said to me, I think my front desk person is stealing from me, and I have no one else to turn to but you.
Wow.
And I really wasn't doing anything that week, so I said to him, okay, I'll meet you tonight at your office after work, and we'll see if we can sort this out. So I went to his office. Of course, 1989, offices weren't computerized. He was using the pegboard system that your older audience might fondly remember.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And we saw what she was doing, which by today's standards was pretty rudimentary. And we got her fired. And the doctor promised to buy me dinner that I'll point out he never did. And I went back to watching TV and didn't give it another thought until 2 weeks later. And 2 weeks later, I was going into my own dentist's office for an appointment. And all of a sudden, you guys know how this is going to end.
I kind of get a feeling, yeah.
I was about to go through the front door, and I looked through the glass, and sitting at the front desk was the same woman that we fired at the other office 2 weeks before.
Oh, my gosh.
So I dashed to the nearest payphone, because, again, in 1989, cell phones were pretty big. And I called the office, and I knew I had to get through the gatekeeper and talk to the doctor, and I didn't know at that point a whole lot about how a dental office functioned, so I was improvising a bit, and what I did was I identified myself as a local orthodontist, and I got put right through to the doctor. And when I got him on the phone, I said, hi, it's not Dr. So-and-so, it's David Harris. I'm the guy who's supposed to be sitting in your chair right now, but let me tell you why I'm not. And I told him about what was going on at his front desk, and he asked me in this very panicked voice, what the hell do I do now? And about 2 sentences later, he'd hired me.
That's interesting.
So that's how I got started. You go to business school and you learn all these things about you need a business plan and you need to study your market and all these things. I did none of that. I just kind of fell into it by accident, and a quarter century later, I'm still here and still smiling.
And I mean, it was obvious that dentists must be easy pickings, apparently. So with that in mind, tell us how big of a problem embezzlement is in dental offices. What's the story on that?
Well, we know it's big. We don't know exactly how big. And the published studies, and there have been a few, come out pretty consistently that somewhere between 50 and 60% of the people surveyed have already been embezzled. Okay. What we don't know is how many of the remaining 40 to 50% will be in the rest of their careers, and how many of the people who said no, they haven't been embezzled actually have and just didn't realize it.
Sure.
So there are some unknowns. I mean, it is very safe to say that 6 of 10 dentists will be embezzled at some point in their careers. The true answer is probably more like 8 of 10.
Sure. Wow.
So,
but is it a tax write-off?
Well, it is, but
of the very worst kind.
As your accountant will tell you, any tax write-off will only save you the amount you lose multiplied by the fractional tax rate.
Yeah, exactly.
So if your tax rate is 40% and you have $100,000 embezzled from you, in the best case, you get 40,000 of it as a tax saving.
Yeah.
Still not a really good deal.
And you weren't planning on just giving someone 40 grand either, so kind of a.
But how many crowns do I have to do per day?
Exactly. So, out of curiosity, so what's your formal training? Are you an accountant by training, or did you work for the FBI? That's what I really want to know. Do you get to carry a gun? That's all I really want to know.
No firearms.
Okay.
And my private investigator license actually specifically says on it no handcuffs.
Oh, doggone.
But they've agreed that in the privacy of my own home, I can do what I want.
That's right. You have a holster. And a
nothing wrong with a pair of fuzzies in the house. That's not
training. Well, I have an MBA. I'm a CPA.
Okay.
I'm a licensed private investigator. I'm what's called a certified fraud examiner and certified in financial forensics.
Okay.
But of anything I have, it's my youthful background of breaking the rules that's of the most value to me.
That's interesting you say that. I'm curious. Okay, so you're essentially, what I'm hearing is you're saying you have a perspective on the criminal mind. And I'm wondering if you feel like a perspective like that. In other words, if you can think kind of like a criminal, you're more likely to be able to think of the creative ways that people might be stealing from your office. I'm wondering, is that helpful for your investigations?
Essential would be a better word.
Sure.
Embezzlers think differently than dentists. And when we hire investigators, the single biggest thing we're looking for is the ability to replicate the criminal thought process.
Okay.
And I have investigators who come to me with all different kinds of educational backgrounds. So I've got former practicing dentists, I've got attorneys, I've got we actually just hired an orthodontist this week. We've got lots of people with lots of education. I will say with not a whole lot of objectivity that probably my best investigator is a guy who never set foot in a college classroom.
Sure.
But he has this almost spooky ability to stand in the shoes of a criminal and say, in this situation, this is how I would steal. And he is he's often right in that in that thought process. And that makes him just dynamite as an investigator. And he can run circles around people who spent a decade or more in college.
How would you differentiate yourself between what you do and a forensic accountant?
Well, I'd say that I have all the qualifications of a forensic accountant, and what we do in an abstract sense is forensic accounting. But in general, when we're doing our work, we spend very little time in a doctor's accounting system and a whole lot of time in their practice management software.
Okay.
Because that's typically where thieves bury the bodies, and that's where we look for them.
Do you think that these advances in technology have allowed more opportunity for embezzlement, or has it lessened? Or
Unquestionably, technology has facilitated embezzlement. Again, when I started in 1989, embezzlement happened, and it probably happened about the same amount of time that it happens now. In other words, I don't think the probability of you being embezzled has changed very much over time. I think that's a relatively static number. What has changed is how much money thieves get from you before they're caught. And in the 90s, a $30,000 embezzlement against the dentist was a big deal. I mean, now that barely breaks the surface, and we've seen the biggest one I've ever seen was almost $2 million.
Wow.
And $500,000 embezzlements are not the norm, but not uncommon.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Before we go any further, I'm just going to say, David was telling us he is going to, if there's stuff that he can't say, he's going to tell us because, unfortunately, we like to think all the listeners of the Dental Hacks podcast are all upstanding citizens. However, this could potentially be an awesome place for embezzlers to learn their stuff. So I
think about 90% of our listening audience is bordering on criminal.
Yeah,
so
you're probably right.
We have to be careful.
You have to at least wonder about their judgment, anyhow. So
okay, are you two finished yet?
Never.
No, that's right. If you get to know us, we are never. So, is dentistry more susceptible than other businesses to embezzlement? Is it? I mean, is it especially susceptible?
It is, and there's a group called the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. These are the people who educate fraud examiners, and every year they do a fairly intensive study of embezzlement. And the three organizations most likely to be embezzled are, in order, government, charity, and healthcare.
Okay.
And everybody else is far lower down the probability scale. I think the reason for that is this. When we think about most commercial activity, it's an exchange of goods or services for money. So if you think about a car dealership, they sell new cars, they sell used cars, they sell parts and service. And if I wanted to if I wanted a surrogate for how much they sold, I could look at, for example, how much they bought. In other words, there's a certain markup on new cars. There's a certain markup on used cars. Forensically, I could recreate the profitability of that dealership by looking at one side of the exchange of goods and services for money. What differentiates those three groups that I mentioned, being government, charity, and healthcare, is in the first two cases, there is no exchange of goods or services for money. If you think about government, they gather money from one group and typically spend it on another.
Yep.
Charities do the same thing. Healthcare has the exchange, but it's a flawed one. And what flaws it is insurance.
Sure.
In other words, most of the work that you guys do every day is paid for by a third party that's not there in the operatory with you.
Right.
And what you can add to that kind of makes it into a toxic cocktail is the fact that most patients are really very unknowledgeable about what you're doing. In other words, it's not often that a patient leaves your chair, they're standing at your front desk, and they say, really? A 5-surface filling? I could swear when Dr. Lipscomb was doing it that it was a 2-surface.
Sure.
The patient IQ about healthcare is very low.
Yeah.
So when you have some other party paying for it and you have the clients, I will call them, of your services not really understanding what just happened to them, that's a ripe climate for embezzlement.
Interesting.
The other thing, though, is this. Your profession has a certain altruism about it. And it's honestly one of the things that makes dentists wonderful to deal with. And I consider myself very lucky to be able to spend my life with this group, because you guys are the ultimate healers. You have this code. You relate to each other in a certain way. And for example, if you send a patient to an orthodontist for assessment and the orthodontist writes you back and says, I think the patient would benefit from orthodontic treatment, you are completely able to rely on the concept that the orthodontist recommendations are based on what's in the patient's best interest, not those of the orthodontist. That's the code that you've learned since you first set foot in dental school. Mm-hmm. And it serves you really well in a clinical context. But as soon as you step outside of that clinical bubble and you're dealing with people who don't share that code, now it becomes a huge liability.
Oh, yeah.
And it makes it easy for somebody to take advantage of you if they just sit there for a minute and think about how you're likely to think about a certain situation.
Interesting. I had never thought of it that way.
And again, I don't think you have to be apologetic about putting the interest of your patients first. That's the hallmark of a professional. But it really handicaps you when you deal with people who have ulterior motives.
And the people you're talking about are potentially the people that are our employees or that are working in the office with us. That's what you're getting at.
That's exactly who I'm talking about. And let's be clear. The overwhelming majority of people who work in dental offices are there for all the right reasons.
Sure.
They want to help people just like you do. And whether they're a hygienist or a receptionist or an office manager, that's a profession that they've chosen in which to deliver that help to people. The very small majority are there for other reasons, and the problem, frankly, is numbers. If you have a 35-year dental career, you will probably have 25 to 40 staff members, and the chances of at least one of them being a rotten apple are overwhelming.
Sure. I got to say that I have a lot of friends and colleagues that like to believe, and I probably fall into this myself, that can't happen to me. My people are too good. They'd never do that. So what do you tell a dentist that feels that, could happen to someone else, but could never happen to me? What's
one of the things that people say when they realize that they've been embezzled from is she, and I'm using the female here because the vast majority of administrative staff in dental offices are female.
Yep.
She was the last person I would ever imagine would have stolen from me. That's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. We all have this internal mental picture of what a criminal looks like. It comes from watching TV. It comes from activity you see in your community, but we all have this mental picture of a criminal. Well, if somebody like that applied for a job in your office, they'd never get one.
Yeah.
So everybody you hire has already passed through your internal filter.
Yep.
The other thing that people don't necessarily realize is that most embezzlers are very long service employees. Certainly for any kind of big embezzlement, they've been there for more than 5 years.
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure that in most cases, they had no concept of stealing from you when they were hired. You know, this came to them later.
Mm-hmm.
So you have somebody who you hire with good intentions. They have good intentions. And then something in their life changes, and one day they start stealing from you. That's going to come as a surprise to you.
Yeah. What's interesting? Okay, I'm gonna step back to what you said. Is the fact that the people who end up embezzling are so many doctors, and I have two relatively close friends that were embezzled from in a relatively big way, and they both said exactly that. Although in retrospect, they can see a lot of features about these people that is relatively obvious in retrospect. But I do have to say, okay,
hindsight's a very exact science.
Exactly. It's easy then, and I suspect it makes them maybe a better employer later. But what's interesting is, okay, so I've talked about this on the show before, and you guys probably heard it ad nauseum. But I used to have trouble with drugs and alcohol, and it was a long time ago. But like I got in pretty serious trouble with some pretty serious drugs. And everyone always said the same thing about me. Oh my gosh, he's the last guy. I couldn't believe that. He was just not like that at all. So I have to tell you that, and I mean, I'm not going to say that, I knew that. I knew that people would never, I knew that people would never believe it was me that was doing this. And that is definitely, it was conscious on my part. Okay. So
and that enabled your addiction, didn't it?
Absolutely it did. And I played that to the hilt, right? Okay. So normal people don't do what I was doing. So I told them, my behavior was I was narcoleptic or just stupid stuff. But the bottom line is that, once you realize that people wouldn't give you credit for what you're doing, it enables you to do a lot more. Like it sort of allows you to justify a lot of crazy stuff.
I'll show you.
Yeah, well, kind of in some ways, but I will say, so what, give us maybe some characteristics of the the person who we'd never believe. This is going to start making some dentists pretty uncomfortable when they're listening to this, but let's hear some.
What I'm going to do, Alan, I think if it's okay, is I'm going to operationalize what you just said about yourself.
Absolutely.
Every dentist I've ever met suffers from this affliction I will call the clinical fantasy. And I'm not talking about sex in the dental chair. That's the other clinical fantasy.
Yeah, Jason, get your mind on the gutter.
This clinical fantasy is the one where your office runs itself. And you come in and you do high-end dentistry and you go home and you do not get interrupted in the middle of a root canal from somebody who's dragging you into the minutia of running your office.
Mm-hmm.
Every dentist I've ever met wants that. And, it's that really cruel trick that they play on you guys in dental school. They wait till you're in fourth year. You're up to your eyeballs in debt, and then they say to you, oh, and by the way, you also have to run a business.
Yeah. If you're lucky, they say it. Sometimes they just don't even say it.
Well, I think it's implied. But every one of you wishes that you could be less involved in the running of your business and devote more of your time and your energy to doing great dentistry. And embezzlers recognize that in you, and they play to it. So they are take charge people. They are organized. They will communicate to you that your time could be better spent in the operatory than looking over their shoulder. And for most of you, that's music to your ears. So there's, in essence, this management vacuum that most of you create that embezzlers are really thrilled to step into and fill.
It sounds like
now I've got you guys thinking.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, who am I thinking about now?
Yeah. Their favorite words in a lot of cases are, I'll take care of that, doctor. You don't need to worry about that, doctor. I'm on it. And when you hire these people, you think that they are the answer to your prayers. And of course, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
So they're efficient, they're multitaskers, and they come in early, they stay late. They appear to be really hard workers. And I've had to explain to more than one victim that superficially working for you and working against you look very similar.
Sure. It's interesting because I've heard both of the people that I know pretty well, these were their superstar employees. But,
yes.
And that's why it was so painful, because they were so, it was people that they thought of as friends and thought of as, as their real, but that always there early and always staying late seems to be what everyone said. They're the ones who are more likely to be in the office when no one else is there.
And they don't want to take vacation, and they don't want to delegate their duties.
Yep.
And sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I know there's a lot of dental offices that have family members working in there, wives and things like that. How does that play into what you've seen in the past?
Well, first of all, I mentioned embezzlement by spouses, and that surprises a lot of dentists because their assumption is if my husband or wife is my office manager, their economic interest is parallel to mine, and they don't, I don't have to worry about them. And in general, that's probably true. There are some exceptions, and one is that if your spouse has decided to dump you and just hasn't told you that yet.
You're the last one to know, yeah.
You're the last one to know.
I thought investment was a marriage vow at some point.
Well, yeah. But if your spouse is going to leave you, and let's assume that they're working in your office and that's really their only source of cash, they're going to realize sooner or later that before they dump you, they need to put some money under their mattress. And they could just go to you and say, Jason, can I please have some money because I'm about to divorce you? But in most cases, instead, they just decide to help themselves. One interesting case we saw a couple of years ago was a dentist who married a woman from another country. And it was a fairly poor country. And he phoned me one day and he said, what I can't understand is how come since I married her 3 years ago that the standard of living of most of her family members has climbed dramatically. And how in a country where the average income is about $8,000 a year, all of a sudden her uncles are all driving $35,000 pickup trucks.
You go to America and you find dentist. Sorry.
That was pretty much the story.
Yeah.
So it wasn't even a divorce situation. I mean, she just didn't want to ask her dentist husband for money to enrich all her family members back in Thailand. She just did it. Wow.
So, I mean, the other thing is so many spouses work in the office, but it's not. I guess I don't know that you necessarily assume it's the problem, but it is something to think about. That's again horrifying. David, I suspect you're used to, when you get in front of audiences, you're used to having a lot of silence in the audience, a lot of jaws hanging after you lay some of the stuff out there. Is that right?
Well, we get two reactions. One is the stunned silence, and the other is the person sitting there with their arms folded, faces tight. Sometimes I can even see a little bruxism, and and they're saying, well, it might happen to the person to the left of me, and it might happen to the person to the right of me, but this won't be my problem. And most of the time, they're making assumptions that are incorrect.
Sure.
And there are lots and lots of misconceptions about embezzlement, and dentists have them. Even unfortunately, some of the people who advise dentists sometimes don't really understand this problem very well. And I'll give you examples. A lot of dentists think that embezzlers steal cash, but that a check payable to the doctor is very difficult for a thief to monetize.
That's an assumption that I would make. As a matter of fact, we've one of the members of the Brain Trust and I went round and round about that. Apparently, I don't have that one all figured out.
I won't share the details tonight of how it's done, But I will say that it's very easy to cash a check payable to somebody else, and that's something we see almost on a daily basis.
Yeah. I have a friend around here that had it was awful. It was one of those things where it was in the news and everything like that. Lots of people around here know about it, but it was pretty bold on her part. Let's just say that it was not in it. Once she was doing it for a while, it got to feeling pretty normal. Let's just say that she had her own separate account. She kind of kept it right there in the office. It was honestly. Opened the drawer and she had her own stamp kind of thing. It was insane. It was and that was what was going on, and I think she was the all-star employee, so the doc never thought about it.
They need to put themselves beyond your questioning.
Yeah, definitely.
I relayed the story too of my dental school actually had the professor that taught us business at the dental school was arrested a couple of years ago for embezzling money from the dental school, and they actually found him because he had a separate account that he thought he had closed, and it still had like 2 or 3 cents in it or something like that. And the bank went to rectify find the owner of the account, and traced it back to the dental school, and found that he had been running this separate account and gleaning money off the side there. So even the people that are teaching us the business of dentistry were actually doing it in my case. So it
absolutely
happens all over the place.
And you bring up a good point as well, because a lot of dentists assume that while staff might steal from them, that a brother or sister dentist who has the same code of ethics they do, who has the same education they do, would never do that. We typically have probably 60 or so open cases at any point in time. So these are cases that we're actively working on. Usually about 5 of them involve dentists stealing from each other in group practices.
That's kind of horrifying. But then again, you know what? I just thought of my third friend who's had an embezzlement problem, and it was a partner. Actually, it was those things where it broke the office up because of that,
Yeah.
And what's interesting is what I remember about that situation was, okay, so the person who was embezzling was just living way above her means, kind of thing. So it's almost like, okay, so someone who's embezzling, a lot of times, you mentioned it earlier, and I kind of want you to go into a little deeper. You said sometimes something will change in their life, and they have to make an adjustment or something like that. Tell us a little more. What kind of changes would embezzlers have in their life that sort of twist them off?
Hey kids, it's your old Uncle Jason. We're back from our interview with David Harris of Prosperident. I know a lot of you are probably scratching your heads and wondering what to do. Am I being embezzled?
You're racing to your office to try and look at your practice management
Yes.
software. I'm trying to decide what kind of uncle you would be. Would you be the fun-loving, the one that's laughing, giving you noogies all the time, or would you be kind of that creepy uncle that people are trying to stay away from?
I just had dinner last night with my nephew and his lovely wife, and we laughed and laughed and laughed the whole time. So,
okay, so you're not you're not the creepy Fox News uncle or anything like that.
No. See, all my parents are very conservative, and then like my nieces and nephews are all more liberal. So I'm kind of like the go-between, the in-between person.
Yeah,
that equals everybody out. I'm the peacemaker in the family.
You're the mushy middle.
Yes, and some jokes thrown in along the way.
Exactly.
At everybody's expense.
Perfect. So again, Prosperident has basically a survey or a risk assessment for your potential embezzlement at your office. There's a link on our show notes. Use the coupon Dental Hacks, and you get to use that.
Dental Hacks.
Yes, and I think we should probably all be doing that. Just maybe you're at very little risk and you're doing everything right, but if not, I think there's some stuff you can do. And basically, Prosperident is probably the company you do it with if you've got concerns. So we hope that's been helpful.
They've got people all over the country. So
seriously, and there's more next week. There's a second half, but he was fascinating. I have to say, I didn't think embezzlement would be as interesting or entertaining as a topic. So I got to give him credit for that. He's very good.
He's got a lot of letters behind his name, so evidently he knows his stuff.
He does. It's true. Lots of letters that help.
I don't know what any of them are, but
I know, right? Okay, so Jason, I want to ask you a question. Tell me how you typically chart your charts. Like what do you, for regular stuff, how do you chart? Do you have a template in your computer? Do you write it all out? Does your staff, is it a combination? How do you do that?
I am actually have a mixture of both because in my smaller office we still have paper charts.
Sure.
Because I'm a cheap bastard.
Well, I get it though. I get it. It's yeah.
And then in the other office we mostly use a template system. So I mean we've got all the SOAP notes and the diagnosis and the things like that to put in there. And that is really helpful. If you guys haven't done that with your office, you need to do that. You will save yourself a lot of headaches.
Mm-hmm. That's essentially what our brain trust is about, a little bit. I have a good friend who I've been talking with a lot. He was recently he was sanctioned by the board for it's a crazy thing. He's a big case. Patient was happy with the dentistry, unhappy with the amount that they had to pay. And it's one of those things where you're like, hindsight 2020, you should have just collected it all at once rather than financing it, because they decided, actually it was, I think the woman's kids decided, well, you should be done paying for this. This is too much. And of course, long story short, there were some of he was reported to the board got a hold of the charts. And do you think if one of your charts gets in front of the board that they won't find something wrong with your documentation?
Yeah,
there's kind of no such thing as a perfect documentation. That's essentially what the Brain Trust talked about. What's the best way to document? So we feature some of our regulars. We have Dr. Melissa Zettler from Savage, Minnesota, and we had Dr. Lance Timmerman from Seattle. We also had Dr. Richard Lowe, and he's coming from Fort Hood, Texas. And if you remember correctly, he was I think he was on first with before he graduated from dental school, actually. But he's in the military now. So he's been on several times too.
And our episode with Roy Shelburne really perked our ears up. So if you guys, after you guys listen to this, go back and listen to that episode, and actually the following episode after that with Melissa's husband.
Yeah, and
it all ties.
It all
together.
Does tie together. As a matter of fact, sit back. You got about 4 hours of listening on this stuff but this was a conversation we had. This wasn't really an interview, and we just talked about. So what are you guys doing for notes? Do we take notes for the right reasons? Are we doing the charting for the right reason? And I just felt like we really dug in deep, and I felt like it was a really good conversation. I think you guys will too.
I'm just going to hire a stenographer to come in, a court stenographer, and just type in everything that we say.
In every operatory. I need one for each operatory. Well, it was interesting. We talked about, okay, so does it make sense to videotape? Does it make sense to audio tape? Does it make sense? And of course, there's probably legalities from state to state, but we really dug in. I was very proud of what we did. It's a pretty good time. So why don't you guys sit back and take a listen to The Brain Trust.
In a world where dentists are often boring and usually humorless, there exists an elite few that rise above the cacophony of mediocrity. Occasionally, these world-class clinicians come together in a meeting of the minds unparalleled anywhere on Earth. We call these gatherings the Dental Hacks Brain Trust.
Hello, Dental Hacks listener. Welcome to another segment of the Brain Trust. We have sort of an intimate panel here today. We have some somewhat regulars. To start with, we have Dr. Lance Timmerman from Seattle. How you doing, Lance?
I'm doing well, thanks.
We have Dr. Melissa Zettler from Savage, Minnesota. Hey, Melissa, what's going on?
Good morning. Not a lot.
And we also have Dr. Richard Lowe from Fort Hood, Texas. Richard, how you doing?
How's it going? Pretty good.
Well, I thank you guys for getting up early to talk with me. We've been trying to get together for a little while here, and I've been sick and miserable, so we finally got together on a Sunday morning, so we appreciate that.
I know, Al, I just want my video back.
Yeah, you don't get it. This is I'm on my third cup of coffee. I don't want anyone getting hurt here. So, yeah. So, okay, we've been kicking around a lot of topics, but one topic that seems to keep coming up in my life that I want to talk to you smart people about. I don't know.
Probably bow out then.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if I needed to hang up.
No, you guys are in. So. You guys are in, man. So, okay, I have a friend who recently went before his state board. He was sanctioned by the state board. And long story short, the patient was upset about money. The dentistry that was done well, and no one could really poke holes in it. I mean, the records showed that, and actually even the patient was very happy with the dentistry. They were not happy that they had to continue to pay. So you could probably argue that the dentist had done something not right with their financial arrangements. But anyhow, long story short, this patient reported my friend to the board. The board took a long time looking over the charts, and he actually went before the board a few weeks ago, and he was sanctioned, or is going in the process of being sanctioned. And what they got was not anything more than his record keeping. They didn't like his record keeping. And mind you, I know how he charts, and his charts are way better than mine. I know that he keeps meticulous charting. Now, mind you, he is what I would consider a big case dentist, if you will. He does more big cases than anyone I know. He does tons of implant surgery. He does tons of full mouth rehab type stuff, which is great. That's not really my bag. I really don't do any of that stuff. But the bottom line is, I think there's an argument to be made that guys like that, women like that, maybe have to have better record keeping for the fact that, honestly, that's a case that's more likely to be complained about. Long story short, I want to talk about.
It's probably the best prevention is don't do big cases.
That's exactly what I've been saying. Honestly, It's terrible because some people, that's the kind of dentistry they need.
Crown.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what specifically about the charting that they had an issue with? Do you know?
They, at one point, he didn't have. It was a bunch of Mickey Mouse stuff.
So it wasn't failure to diagnose. It wasn't failure to have a treatment plan. It wasn't a signed fee estimate. It wasn't.
What I think happened was I think they didn't like the second half of the treatment plan. Kind of happened on he finished up like a big, like essentially rehabbing the lower, and then offered up, hey, if you like the lower, we can do something similar for the upper, and probably didn't nail down the fees as well as he should have on the upper. But the case ended up being, over the total of it, and she totally was on board for the lower. The total for both of them was probably over $50,000, a big, huge case. And so what happened was she was mad about, she was done paying. She felt like she had paid enough. And meanwhile, if you don't get to say that when you buy a car, you don't get to say, a year and a half into a 3-year loan that, it's a nice car and everything, but I just feel like I've paid enough for it. You don't get to say that. But when it's healthcare and when it's dentists and, rich dentists don't deserve anything. And when it's a case this big. Teeth. Yeah. So I think they didn't like his financial arrangements. I think at one point there was not he saw her over a period of time, and there was maybe his perio charting on perio charting on teeth that he was going to extract. So probably that was something, but he had all kinds of radiographs. He had all kinds of photos. What happens is if you put a chart in front of a dental board when you've got a hacked off patient, the dental board can always find something that they don't like about the chart. Now, I've not seen the chart. I don't know. Maybe he just did a terrible job, but I've seen the way he charts, and he didn't do a terrible job. I'm sure of that.
You have to understand, anytime that they come into your office, they're going to find something. They just will. How could they not? There's always going to be something, and
it's frustrating.
Well,
Go ahead.
I probably shouldn't admit this, but I had a board complaint years ago, and it was total bullshit. And I got a judgment against me. It was about
money too, I bet, wasn't it?
No. Well, it's always about the money, but it's
always
never
about
the money. Yeah. And what ended up happening is I had this judgment, and it was stupid. It was like $10,000 fine, 30 hours of CE, and something else. But I still thought the entire thing was bullshit. So I fought it. And when I fought it and really dug my heels, then they came back and dropped everything. So I wonder if he's just at least went through the motions of fighting it just one more try.
Super funny that you say that, because I know that he's having. Here's the thing, his sanction is gonna, it's a certain amount of money. It's a lot of money. It's like it's in the thousands of dollars. Which did
he get a lawyer?
Oh yeah.
Good.
And the lawyer is saying, you know what, their record keeping stuff, there's no defending the record keeping stuff because you have some stuff, or you're missing some stuff that they are saying you need to have. Here's the thing.
Which is just the fee estimate and perio charting on teeth to be extracted.
they're I don't remember all of it, but it was one of these things where I think to myself, if I had them look over my charts, they'd throw me in jail more than likely. It's one of these things where I think if they can nail him on this, oh my God, they can nail anyone for anything. So part of it is making sure you don't get landed on. Part of it is that
Don't
And
piss
set
off
the
your
precedent.
patients.
well, and if you could put a flag on the patients that might be the problem, as Lance said, start with the idea that don't do big cases, and then secondly, if you're doing a big case, understand that your record keeping. This is terrible. Your record should always be excellent all the time, but a big case is probably more likely to blow up in your face with regard to the patient expectations, right? I mean,
Right. Well, I have a current situation where it's a single tooth that, this other dentist is trying to throw me under the bus on a contour of a crown and standard of care, and it's all total bullshit. But I'm pretty sure this whole thing's not going to go to the board because it's a single tooth.
On
It has
contour
been-
of a crown? That's
Oh my
stupid.
God.
What?
Oh my God! I'll send you the.
yeah, I've been following it. It's pretty ridiculous. It's what it is it's actually one dentist trying to swing his dick around. Essentially, is what it comes
Yeah,
down to.
it's exactly what it is. His way of presenting to the patient is he put the edge of his Explorer where the margin would be, and he lifted his thumb. The Explorer should have slid and fallen, but since it stayed there, that meant that it was hooked.
Oh,
And I
boy.
called-
Okay.
So I called.
I'm afraid I'm unfamiliar with that standard of marginal integrity.
Yeah, I said
That wasn't part of our boards.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. So this guy is affiliated with the local dental school, so he, I think, is saying, well, this is the way we teach. Well, okay, you guys are
Oh, boy.
because that's bullshit.
I will say, I haven't run into this. I should knock on some wood here.
Yeah.
It's not wood, but it'll work. I haven't run into this, but part of it is it felt like they were gunning for him a little bit because he also does a lot of sedation dentistry. And
Yeah,
a couple
if you're doing big
a couple people weighed in that his sedation protocols were wrong. Like they were claiming that he was using triazolam with nitrous oxide, and they were claiming that was general anesthesia. And I'm like, well, the other thing is just he had a nurse anesthetist for this case, so it's not like he was doing this alone. But on top of that, for you people that do sedation, triazolam with nitrous, does that equal general anesthesia?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
I wish.
Yeah, well, exactly. I was going to say my history. Just going to say this: I've been known to take a lot of benzos at once. I mean, this was some years ago, mind you. This was not any kind of therapeutic use. Let's just say that this was sort of more recreational. Benzos are pretty safe. Benzos like it's pretty hard to, and actually nitrous in and of itself is pretty safe too, as long as your oxygen level. So now I'm no expert, so don't listen to me on that. But the bottom line is for them to claim that that's general anesthesia seems a little nutty to me. I'm no expert though, so I could be wrong.
In the Army, so when I do my residency starting in June, we're going to get oral conscious sedation training. So we're going to be using benzodiazepines, Halcyon. And if you throw nitrous on top of that, they call it moderate sedation.
Yep.
Not general anesthesia.
Yep.
No.
And I won't be credentialed to do it. So I can't do that. I can't add nitrous on top of that.
Because it's moderate though. And
because now
it's more than mild. But that's the chart
It
said
takes
moderate.
you from anxiolysis to moderate, but it's not. Yeah, I mean, come on, general.
Well, don't you have to? I mean, if it were general anesthesia, aren't they saying you have to intubate the patient at that point? You have to handle their breathing.
You can't
and stuff,
support
right?
your own airway.
Yeah.
Is kind of what general anesthesia is, and if those people aren't breathing on your own, you have a problem.
Right.
You do. So, okay, what I'm coming back to though is, I'm just curious, what you guys think of. I hesitate to say how do you chart. But I'm a little curious about how you guys go about your charting. And then Melissa had mentioned before we came on some interesting, like that plastic surgeon you were talking about. I want to talk about that too, because first off, how do you chart? How much is enough? And that question is one of those things where you can just chase that down the rabbit hole. How much is enough and how much is reasonable? And as Melissa and her husband have mentioned, is it worth trying to chart so you can cover your ass? I mean, at what point is it enough? And I'm wondering
why we chart?
And I don't think I think once something happens, once you end up at the board like this person has, you can always look back at your chart and say, dang, I wish I would have done that a little bit better. You can't live your life charting for litigation. And, it's the same thing with you got to chart for the standard of care. And it's kind of insurance is not the same, but it's kind of going down the same path that, like, let's take crown buildups. Now they want you to photograph the tooth before to prove it needs a crown, after you remove the amalgam to to prove there's enough missing to support charging for a buildup. Photograph this, photograph this. It's like at some point you got to do dentistry. Well, why don't we just have a digital chart and, record everything? I don't know.
It's interesting that you say that too, because I will say that I would be okay with that. I will say that my workflow hasn't really included it yet, but since I added these, I have microscopes now in all my operatories, and I have a camera on all of them, and I'm getting to the point where snapping a photo is really quick. It's just one more button push, and it's kind of a done deal. It isn't going to grab the SLR with the ring flash. I can do it through the scope, and it's pretty easy. And so I'm thinking to myself, and I don't pretend that a scope is going to be like the norm at any point, but I kind of love that. On the other hand, we almost never get a request from the X-ray or from the insurance regarding a photo. It's typically an X-ray and a narrative. Well,
you understand why, don't you? Because they're waiting for them to come in and audit, and then you have to prove it up, or they're going to ask for back fees.
Yeah, maybe. But on the other hand, I think, who do they audit?
I don't know.
Do they? I don't think audits are random that way. I can't imagine. I will say that I'm small potatoes. I'm a teeny little practice. I hardly ever charge out a core buildup. It's one of those things where I suspect a lot of the red flag practices I don't do. Now, mind you, the red flag practices have nothing to do with anything except the insurance has to pay out more for them. That's what. So if you're, what are the red flag practices I'm talking about?
I think CIREC might be a red flag for some people. We don't do very many buildups in our practice either. But, it seems to me like most of the people I know who have been audited own a CIREC machine.
Interesting. How about CT machines?
I don't know, because we don't charge those out to insurance because they don't pay it.
Sure, fair enough. But it is interesting. It's like the patient or dentists that provide maybe higher tech or newer procedures. Or what about a dentist who treats, let's say, on average, more perio than another dentist? In other words, does that mean he literally has more perio in his practice, or that he does more diagnosis of perio? Because they would love it if you diagnosed no perio and treated no perio and gave everyone, even with 8mm pockets, of prophy, right? Because it doesn't cost them as much, right?
Yeah.
So that the insurance companies, they would never admit this, but the reality is their red flag system is different than maybe what dental excellence would equal,
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're exactly right. It comes down to this dentist costs us more money.
Yep.
So we better investigate that.
So I tend to think that I'm less likely to be audited because I'm sort of a small potatoes practice. What's that?
Are you a cheap date?
I'm a cheap date. For them, I am. For them, I definitely am. But all right. So, and the other thing, the reason I wanted to bring this up to the Brain Trust is because I want to steal all your good ideas. I'm going to up my game with charting. Right now I don't. Our hygiene uses templates within Dentrix, and they're pretty good. I don't really use templates myself for my stuff. I typically the assistant chart stuff, and I look it over, and it's not as good as it needs to be, is the bottom line. So I'm going to up my game, and I'm just curious how you guys do it. I want to start with Richard because, as I mentioned before, you work for a government bureaucracy, and it seems to me that government bureaucracies would be particularly specific in the way that they want things charted. So I'm just curious.
I like your weighted language.
Yeah.
Tell me about your bureaucracy.
That's right.
Like, you didn't say efficient, you said specific.
That's right. So how do they like you to do it in the Army?
We are still using paper charts.
Okay.
And so, yeah. It's a nightmare. We're in a clinic with 10 dentists, and just trying to track down your charts for the day for like all the patients that you have can be a fiasco. They've just upgraded our charting system. We've used like the same system for 20 years. I think we're supposed to go digital in like 3 to 4 years, but we'll see if that actually happens. And the way that it works is there's like a cover sheet for the exam. Every time you do an exam, you're supposed to do this new cover sheet. There's a little odontogram. You like chart everything that needs to be done in pencil. You then like write it down in this block for the treatment plan in pen. So there's like pen proof. You can't just erase someone's treatment plan because you didn't want to do it.
Okay.
Which happens and has happened.
But I'm with you, man.
Let's just call it a watch. Just add a little.
I didn't think you were ever supposed to chart in pencil, but I could be wrong about that.
Just the lingual of 15 on that the person that can't open and is about 100 pounds overweight. We'll watch that.
Sorry.
It would totally make sense to have it all in pen. But I think the pencil thing is so that you can erase it on the planned odontogram, and then you transfer it down
To the
in pen
finished.
to the finished
Yeah.
odontogram. So then
I have to say, you're the only person I've ever heard use the term odontogram. Just
Well,
I
the
don't
Army-
even
the
know
Army
what that
uses
is.
it. It's a picture of the teeth,
Yeah.
the little.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
An
All right.
odontogram. Got
I
it.
figured it out, but I was like, oh, there is a word for that.
Yeah.
No, that's what they call it. So the teeth picture. Yeah, and then we've got a timeout sticker that like takes up a large amount of room every time we're writing our note. We have to stick this huge timeout sticker, and we're supposed to talk to the patient about what we're doing, make sure we have sterile instruments.
Tell me about what is a timeout sticker? I don't even know what that is.
Before we do anything on any patient, we're supposed to have a timeout, meaning me and my assistant and the patient verify their name, date of birth. We verify the procedures we're doing. We verify that we're using sterile instruments.
So that's basically putting an X on the leg you're going to amputate is essentially what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough.
trying to avoid wrong site anesthesia or drilling on the wrong tooth or extracting the wrong tooth, because the reality of being in a large organization doing dentistry is that you're seeing patients sometimes for the first time that someone else treatment planned, and maybe they didn't transfer on the odontograms that they actually did the treatment. And so if you didn't go back and read the notes and realize, oh, this filling's already been done, and they mischarted it, you can end up working on a tooth that didn't need to be worked on if you don't check first.
Fair enough.
Which
that's probably not a bad.
It's a great practice.
It's not a bad
good
practice.
thing.
You could do it in private practice in such a way that it doesn't seem like you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Right.
Well, I will say, every oral surgeon's office that I've ever been in, and particularly at the university when we were taking this class, they have that little chalkboard with the patient's name on it, their blood pressure, and the tooth that you're working on, and it's written up before the patient ever walks in the room, and you verify it. So that's actually really smart. I got to say, we probably don't do that in my office so much.
No, and it is smart, and it's especially smart when, like I said, you've never seen this patient before, and you're going off someone else's treatment plan. It's a good chance to just check and make sure, and I think patients appreciate it. And the problem is that if something goes wrong, and so my first week at this clinic, working on patients for like the first time out of dental school, I opened up the chart. I was like, okay, we need to do number 5 MOD. And I didn't look in the mouth. I did every other step of the timeout sticker because there's all these little check marks and everyone's got to sign it. But I didn't lean him back, open up, take a look, and then lean him back up and then sign the sticker. Like that's technically how you're supposed to do it.
Yep.
And so I put the topical in there, let it sit, and then gave my block or my injection, and then looked at the tooth after I'd done the injection and realized, oh, hey, this looks like a fresh amalgam, and looked back a few pages and realized that it had been done and not transferred and not charted and not brought forward. And so that is a wrong site anesthesia.
But that's nothing that's irreversible. I mean, it sucks, but it's like, really, I mean, what?
Well,
I've never done that before.
Never.
I mean, not this week yet, anyhow. Yeah.
Right. Well, the problem is that like we fall under a medical medcom is what we call it in the Army, and a wrong site anesthesia like can be a bigger deal, and so it gets lumped in that category. And so I had to report it, and then they had to run a root cause analysis, and there's about like 10 man hours.
Let me help you with that root cause analysis.
Right.
First week on the job, a little nervous. There you go.
Right.
There's your root cause analysis. Now, what I'm assuming is they made 50 push-ups, probably, right? That's a military thing.
I had to run 5 laps.
I'm thinking, I was supposed to numb up the other 19.
Yeah,
Oh.
that's right. That's the European 19, 19.
And I should have just like found something else up on the chart and I just needed to clamp here,
Yeah.
and so that's why I was getting it numb. And then we're doing
I like that.
No, but it taught me like okay, we gotta follow all the Army's protocols correctly. We gotta.
Well, you have a lot of hands in your pot, so I could see how that would easily, Yeah, you could have confusion.
Super tough if you're not diagnosing the patient you're working on. I'm going to tell you. But I know that plenty of like bigger, group practices, Aspen Dental, that sort of thing. They have tons of dentists that are, they may not do the crown they diagnose. That happens a lot. It's interesting.
Right. No, and I think that's one of the interesting things about it is that they want us to be charting uniformly. We just had, we have this new form, this new training, because it's going to be going to another dentist. And so if you're charting one way and he's charting the other way, or she's doing this, it becomes just a little bit more complicated. So they're trying to standardize it as much as possible. The thing I'm most frustrated with is just like handwriting, like handwriting notes. And then you look back at someone else's handwriting or even your own handwriting, and you're trying to read it and trying to figure out what happened. It can be frustrating.
Handwriting is tough too, because you're invariably
in a hurry.
Well, you're in a hurry. Typically, even in dental school, right? You have one patient in the morning, one patient in the afternoon. You're handwriting your notes. Everyone else is done in clinic and to lunch, and you're like, really? And so you're busting ass to handwrite. And the instructors were not looking that closely at what you were charting. And I remember that you had to write a book for dental school, but handwriting is a problem in that way. If you're running a business, it's like that much worse too. I mean,
right.
We're sort of in between paper and electronic at this point. We still kind of have a paper chart that we kind of keep a lot of their stuff in. But, I think eventually I want to go electronic. I'm sort of surprised that the Army is electronic. It's only because, there's lots of different locations where they're doing the Would you say that your charting is the same as charting at other bases, other centers where they have dentists, or is it different, you think, at each place?
I think they are doing their best to standardize it across locations. And so that when you get a chart from another, because guys are moving around in the Army all the time.
Sure.
And so, you get someone from some other clinic, just came from the other side of the country. And I feel like it's not weird or different. I mean, the biggest difference is like, what were they a good charter? Do they have good handwriting, or were they thorough in their documentation, or were they a little bit lazy and hard to read their handwriting?
Did they forget to cross off number 5 MOD?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Did they erase it on the pencil odontogram and transfer it to the pen odontogram?
Yeah. Well, so the one thing you can give them a hard time, but they do have a system.
They do.
And when people follow the system the way it's supposed to be followed, it's relatively consistent and everything. And
it totally works.
That's a big deal. Like just having it systematized,
Yeah, no, totally.
And eventually you end up with a system in your office that, because what we do is relatively repetitive. But the question is, is it a system that's in place because you intentionally put it there, or is it the system that's just sort of there? Is it the system that sort of organically was formed?
Did you build the system, or did you inherit it?
Exactly. And I think I will say that a fair amount of mine was inherited from the guy that I bought my practice from in 1998. Wow. And my dad, at least to start with, and my dad graduated in 1968. So, they probably did things a little bit differently then. So I'm sort of trying to come up with my own. Now, when you do a chart note, do they have a checkbox style thing, or do you have to write everything out freehand, or is it somewhere in between, or what?
You just write it all out. So the timeout sticker literally is this big sticker you put on there, and then you kind of write around that or right below that what you actually did. And I think there is, you're supposed to justify if you used rubber dam or why you didn't. You're supposed to, there's things you're supposed to do, but there's no stamp for that or, checklist or anything like that. You just write it all out.
Wow. Okay. Is there a time limit on, do you have an appointment book where if you are running late, that becomes a problem, or not really?
Yeah. I mean, we right now at our clinic, we have a lot of control over our own schedule, me and my assistant. And, she is mostly getting after me because I try and schedule a little bit more, or I think I can do more, or because I'm still slow, like I graduated 10 months ago.
Yeah.
But I'm still anxious to do more, and like, oh yeah, I can totally do these 3 MODs in an hour, and I cannot do 3 MODs in an hour, back to back or whatever. And
you doing mostly composite or amalgam?
Mostly amalgam.
Okay.
And I don't like doing
3 MODs back to back by any standard is the stuff of nightmares, just so you know.
Right. No, I know.
We call those crowns in my office.
Yeah.
And I was just using that example because it's not embarrassing. If I actually said what I can't doing in an hour, then
no, I get it. Dude, I'm the slowest dentist, and it's all good. I mean, that's a natural process, but you're doing. I like the fact that you're trying to do more than you can, even though that. But okay, I'm sorry, I cut you off. So typically, it sounds like you kind of have to give yourself some time within your planning for the charting, though, because that's a long charting process.
Yeah, and I guess you just kind of like, if you can get to them, you can get to them, before lunch, or you do them all real quick before lunch or at the end of the day. But I mean, they're not booking us that tight. So, and at my clinic in particular, we have a more dentally healthy patient base. We service the hospital, and we service the command at all of Fort Hood, and so we have some patients that have a little higher dental IQs.
Sure.
And we also have a pretty good doctor to patient ratio where we're not super swamped, and so I don't have to be booking myself super tight if I don't want to be. I have that luxury. At other clinics, where they're seeing, a ton of infantry guys, and, they all have quadrants of bombed out teeth. They book them pretty tight, and they don't have a lot of control over their own schedule. But here we can do some specialty work. I've been doing a lot of CERAC crowns,
nice.
Been able to do some third molars and work with some of the specialists here. So it's been really nice. I've been really grateful for the specific clinic that I'm actually at right now.
That's cool. Let me ask you this: when your chart notes, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because listeners will go, okay, that's it, I'm out. Do you do like a soap style note, or do you do more procedure based depending on the situation, or what?
I was trained in dental school with the soap note, so that's just kind of my flow. I don't actually put the S, O, A, and P anymore,
Sure.
But I kind of go through those steps. So that's just what I do. And I think that they recommend that in the Army. There's some big document on charting, and I need to go over it again. It's one of those things that it's just never that fun to read.
No, it's horribly boring, but it comes down to important. My thing is can you do a really great chart note, but have enough of it automated that it just doesn't take that long? That's like the goal I'm looking for.
Right.
So, okay, Lance and Melissa, I want you to jump in here. Melissa, how do you guys do charting in your office, and when and how,
Yeah.
Does the note generate itself like a soap note, or is it less like a soap note? Or tell me that.
So our office is actually kind of for the last 6 months in a transition phase with this. So it used to be that I did all my own documentation. And, some days you're just so busy and you don't get it done, and you go back and do it a day or two later. And that was really basically upsetting my team because they want to close out the month and I'm the one delaying it. And we always have the diagnosis in the chart because we get that in the hygiene chair or at their initial comp visit. But it would just be the procedural note that was missing. And so my assistant went through and did what you guys probably have been doing forever. And she set up 8,000 templates. And so now what we're doing is having my assistants go in, and they will open up the template. They will fill in all the blanks, leave it unsigned. And then at the end of the day, all I have to do is go in and say, yes, that's the right diagnosis, right tooth, right amount of anesthetic. Yes, that's what we did. And then I sign off on it. And in our morning meeting, our assistants are supposed to have gone through our patients we're seeing for the day, making sure that as part of the visit, we have a signed fee estimate treatment plan so that their estimated copays on there and all this is done. That being said, there's been times where somebody's called and they're upset, and we've looked for the signed fee estimate, and that's the one procedure we don't have it for. But most of the time, they do have it, and then they can pull it out, put it down in front of the patient and say, well, here's where we went over the fees with you. Nothing has changed, or if there was a change, then we document that. Patient aware of change in treatment plan. And it's really, when the system works, it's really been great to set that fee estimate down in front of them, let them look at their own signature and kind of go, yeah. But, there's been plenty of times too where we're like, okay, well, where's that fee estimate? Well, I don't know. She did. He did. And of course, nobody ever did it. But
It's amazing because even when it's systematized, it's a lot to get in there correctly, Sure,
because your schedule changes. Sometimes you'll be working in your day, and so you've had everything you need for that morning huddle, but now you've added a patient to your schedule. They're in pain. now, you're opening up a tooth, just trying to get them comfortable in between patients. Well, maybe you don't have a signed fee estimate for a gross pulpal debridement. Insurance isn't paying it. They're mad.
Oh, yeah, everyone's mad at that point. Yeah, good time.
Yeah, now you don't have a signed fee estimate for your emergency procedure.
Yeah. The other thing is I don't think I probably have any signed fee estimates for anything. I think we explicitly go over fees and we typically hand them something, but I don't know that we have it signed in our chart. So that's, again, in Minnesota, they just throw me in jail.
Yeah, we try to sign and scan all of that.
They might throw me in jail in Michigan too, except that I haven't gotten landed on. And of course, the solution is, as I've always said, just don't get landed on. You're fine. You can have really shitty notes. It won't matter, right? That's the problem is that getting landed on is the problem. It's like a
tree falls in the forest.
Exactly.
Kind of
Exactly. I like that. So, but you're telling me for your procedural stuff anyhow, and your diagnosis stuff, you have templates set up that you can then alter, customize that need. Is that right?
Yeah. So, let's see your comments.
And welcome back. I thought that was pretty kick-ass.
That was pretty kick-ass.
Nice. So, yeah, there will be more. We pick up that conversation next week, but I was pretty proud of what we got into. And here's the deal. info@dentalhacks.com is the email. If you have comments on either of these things, whether it be embezzlement or 3Shape or charting, particularly the charting, I'd love to hear, how are you guys charting, and what have you done to make it easier? Because that's what Jason was talking about. The template system, I know at least in Dentrix, it's really good. I'm going to up my game. My charting is not as good as it needs to be, and that Dentrix template system, if you put some thought and work into that, you could really get very comprehensive notes without a ton of effort. I think
I'll give a little
doable.
hint too on mine. I had some inside people in some of the corporate dental offices.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys know how to chart because they are covering their booty. So if you know anybody in the corporate office,
exactly,
copy their templates.
Well, I was going to say, maybe we can get Tammy Bailey to give us some hints, because she's at Heartland. And I have a friend in a corporate office in Minnesota that I've been in contact with. If I get any tips, we're going to put it up on the website. We'll give you a link to it and stuff. But that's what I want to hear. If anyone who's listening who's in a corporate situation, who's like, I got some great templates, let's share. Let's let people know, because this is important stuff. Very good stuff.
Maybe we could even start the Dental Hacks Dropbox.
There you go. Oh, my gosh. It's a great idea. We could totally do that. I'm all about that. So we'll be in on that. All right, now is the time of the show where we do everyone's favorite thing. It's where my voice goes funny when I say, go hack yourself.
But I never.
Jason, as tradition dictates, go hack yourself.
Oh, who are these people? My Go Hack Yourself today is I just got back from a orthodontic class that I took in Alexandria, Virginia, which is a lovely place to visit if you haven't been there.
He took the train, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, the train on the Eastern Coast is fantastic. That's much awesome. Better than dealing with traffic.
That's super awesome.
I took a course part of the USDI group. I actually took a 2-year continuum several years ago. And then after completion of the USDI continuum, I can take any of their classes across the country for free. So had that advanced class come in today. So that's my Go Hack Yourself, is the USDI system. I think it's pretty cool for general practitioners, and most of it's run by all general practitioners. And it's a great way to learn some ortho. Even if you don't want to do ortho, it does really teach you how to treatment plan and kind of pick up on ortho, some things.
Like, it's worth taking a full-on ortho course just for the treatment planning and for knowing what you're, honestly, for being conversant with an orthodontist. I don't do any ortho in my office, but I feel like I have a better idea of how there's going to be treated. I can explain it better to my patients because I actually took Rick Litt's class in Birmingham, Michigan 100 years ago.
And two, if you do implants or restorative dentistry or cosmetic dentistry, there's a lot of times where I just need this tooth just to move over here, or this, that, and the other thing. It's great to be able to have that skill set to be able to do that and open a space for an implant or do something like that. It's so much easier to have a couple of things in your office that you can pop it in. And if you do Invisalign, you really need to know the foundations of orthodontics. Sure. Because a lot of people jump into Invisalign and try to do stuff, or even
you're still on the hook for the diagnosis. So yeah, it's worth knowing that stuff for sure.
6-month smiles. I know a lot of people love it, but a lot of those 6-month smiles turn into 2-year smiles. So
well, I mean, 6 month smiles may be appropriate in a lot of cases, but it's good to have the full. It's good to have the full knowledge base, even if you're not treating the comprehensive cases.
Oh yeah, and you're still on the hook if something goes wrong.
Yeah,
they're not going to be there for you. It's going to be
you can't say, "Hey, look, 6 months, I'm out, I'm done.
Yeah.
That's it, I'm done."
Statute of limitations.
That's right. 6 months. I said 6 months. You heard me. Yeah, that goes back to our charting thing. So
it's really good to have a good basic knowledge.
Definitely. All right. Well, my Go Hack Yourself is a product. Oh, go ahead.
What is it?
What is it?
Your Go Hack Yourself.
My Go Hack Yourself it's called the Super Curve Matrix. It's from Triadent. You can buy it from Ultradent, and it's like a sectional matrix. The one side. But what's
like
cool
36D?
About it? 36D is hot. It wraps around the tooth mole. That's what it is. I literally just got them. Just tried them a couple weeks ago or last week, and I'm sold, man. It wraps the tooth further around. So all you have to do when you seat your V3 ring or whatever, you don't have to struggle to make sure that. I don't know. It's super smart. What's happened with these
super curve? It
is super curve and super smart. What's happened with these things is the design just continues to get better. You'd think, oh, this is old technology. We've been doing this for years. Except they kind of keep making it better. So I'm a strong proponent. If you don't have a matrix like a sectional matrix system, take a look at the Triadent, the V3, and the Super Curve, or even the Super Curve matrices with the BioClear V3 style ring. I forget what they're called, but they're terrific too. They're very good. I like both of them. So
I use the V3 for almost everything.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I still pull out the old Toffelmeyer, but and the V3 mixed with some Teflon tape.
Mm-hmm. The Teflon tape with the V3 and a good matrix is kind of hard to beat. It's pretty cool. So
yeah,
I actually think I have a video of me using. If anyone wants to see, I can put a video of me stuffing the Teflon tape in a matrix to get better contour. I think I actually have that. I'll go look for that. So, all right, my friends, we've basically wrapped it up here. We're looking for emails. If you have any questions, comments about the podcast, info@dentalhacks.com. If you would, take a little time, go to iTunes, give us 5-star rating, and write a review. If you think we're good or you think we're terrible, if you think maybe someone would benefit from hearing from us, go to iTunes, let the world know. And also, even if you don't do that, tell a friend. That dental school buddy that you haven't heard from in years, call him. Say, you know what? I don't know what you're doing. I know nothing about you. However, you should listen to this podcast. That's what you should do.
And send us the email, even if it's a short one. We're trying to build a list of emails so we can
spam
let you guys
Wait,
know.
Did I say that? I'm kidding.
And spam you.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to push the Prema.
Yeah, we are actually. That is true. Jason is kind of working with MailChimp on that deal, so you're going to see that roll out. Yes, the chimp is actually in his office that he's working with. It's kind of impressive. I never knew he had that skill.
Shedding problem.
Exactly, but it's kind of smelly. But he's working with the chimp, and we're trying to get an email list so that we can actually send you show notes directly to your email instead of you having to go look for them. We can, if there's special episodes, that sort of thing. And speaking of special episodes, here's the other thing you can do if you want to support the podcast. We now have a Patreon page. You can catch us at dentalhacks.com/Patreon, Patreon. This is a place where you can throw a couple bucks at us, and you'll get special stuff from us, including in May, you will be getting the very first episode that only Patreon supporters will get.
Ooh.
Now, we have 3 new Patreon supporters since last week, and I just want to mention their names because we are super grateful for them. First, we have Dr. Paul Springs, we have Dr. Mac Jones, and we have Dr. Candace Krause. All 3 of them joined our Patreon page, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's totally cool. Like, it makes me very happy to know that, hey, someone is listening enough that they think it's worth it. And you guys are going to get tons of cool stuff from us. My understanding is Jason is working on selfies that he's going to just put up there just for you guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm getting my chest waxed.
Yeah,
just for you guys.
Back the whole 9 yards. You guys had no idea the value you'd be receiving for your Patreon pledges. But
is that what we're calling it?
So thank you. That's totally awesome. So go to iTunes, go to Patreon, go check out our swag store. You can, I believe it's dentalhacks.com/swag. And buy T-shirts, buy coffee mugs. You can see Jason and my face looking at you as you drink your coffee. I think it would be brilliant for you to do that.
Yes.
All right, so we have pretty much pimped everything we can pimp out of. We're done pimping, and
it ain't easy.
It ain't easy being this way.
It ain't.